Dumela Dakse Locheni Sawubona Ndato Bella Molo Abusheni. Hello and good morning and welcome to this special Red Zone Financial Mail and Kantar South Africa discussion as we probe a big question this morning. COVID-19 has changed everything, but has your marketing plan kept up? To help us unpack this morning, we're joined by an esteemed panel who are going to do a cross of presenting and answering some questions for us. Ivan Moroke is the CEO of Kantar South Africa. AB Mokhwatsane is the Managing Executive of Brand Communication and Sponsorship at Vodacom. Kunal Sagal is the Marketing Director of RB Health Africa. And Natalie Otte is the Chief Client Officer at Kantar. Speaking of Kantar, they've been very busy over the past several months. This morning, we're going to unpack findings from Kantar's Global Business Compass survey conducted among 4,500 business leaders, with over 900 of them C-suite, to help your business navigate the unknown with powerful insights to contextualize, align, and inform your recovery strategy in 2021 and beyond. And that's not all. We'll also look at Kantar's 8-wave global COVID-19 Barometer study, which has tapped into the ever-changing attitudes of over 150,000 consumers, helping marketers like you and I keep their fingers on the pulse of changes brought about by coronavirus, and there are a lot of them, so that brands can better understand the impact of the pandemic and the ensuing changing consumer behaviors. This morning, we're looking forward to distilling these SA-specific findings of both studies conducted in more than 60 markets to unpack learnings so you can identify growth opportunities for both your brand and your business. And as mentioned, we'll also be joined by AB and Kunal for comment in a special Q&A part. So if you have a question for either of these two marketing rock stars, you can feel free to pop them in the live chat. Any comments as well are welcome in that live chat on the Arena Events platforms. But let's not waste any time. There's a lot to get through this morning, a lot of learning to be done. So Ivan, over to you to talk about Kantar's Global Business Compass survey. Tell us a little bit more about the findings.
Thank you so much, Arye, and good morning to all. As I prepare to share my screen, I hope you are all good and all strong in mind and body. And I'm just trying to find where, there we go. Great stuff. I suppose you can all see my screen now.
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic, that's great. And yeah, thanks so much. And as I said, just to kick off, we are aware about how much everyone is spoiled for choice in terms of webinars that they can attend and all that. So we do not take for granted the hour that you have given of your life to join us today. And there's a lot to cover. So really, really appreciate it. I think as Arye has said from the beginning that there are two sides that you'll be sharing. As Kantar, we've always, since the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, we have across the world been tracking consumer behavior of COVID-19 and their impact for business. And for our clients, it has been fantastic because we're able to be giving them some insights that they can make sure that when they do their plan, that it is based on those insights. So we've been doing that, and Nat will later on be sharing that with you. But then we decided during the middle of the year, globally as well, to say, can we get a perspective of the business and their teams to say how are organizations themselves responding to the COVID-19? And as has been said, this has been a global study, and we are fortunate as South Africa that we are chosen as one of those that will be part of that. It was in 70 countries across 40 of our global clients, and included over 70 of South African clients. And in terms of that set of the people we talk to, these are CEOs, CFOs, and marketing experts and insight experts. So I will share that. And then, as I said, then Natalie will follow after that and share from the consumer perspective. That's great because the combination of the two is the best way to give you the key insights that you need to do plans that will lead to holistic perspectives and a holistic perspective for recovery and growth. It was fun doing this. I mean, once I got invited to this, it was fun because I said, okay, what is a presentation without quotes? And it was fun trying to find quotes that did not include Charles Darwin quotes about adapting to change. And on the left is still one of my favorites, never let a good crisis go to waste by Winston Churchill. But then I discovered a nice rhythmic African proverb that talks about dancing to a different tune. And lastly, I think a poignant one from Angel Subu, who said, it's okay when trouble comes in, but you don't have to embrace the trouble. And if you think about it, coronavirus is like the uninvited guest that Angel Subu was talking about. But as the coach said, you don't have to give it a chair to sit on. So to kick off, firstly, what I'm going to give you is going to be top line findings on this, because there's never enough time in terms of this. And as you might have picked up, that I think we want to have lots and lots of conversations after this. So I'm going to give you top lines in terms of this business view findings. Me and Natalie, more than happy after this to come and present it in more details with your teams and also with your key stakeholders. May I just realized something. I've been out, and if you see my glasses being dark, I'm not trying to be cool. They are actually spectacles, so I think the dark shade will come off. It's not me trying to be all cool. Just thinking I'll be disclosing. The next thing is the speed I'm going to do this with. I think the slides are self-explanatory, so we'll be moving quite quickly, faster than how trained on steroids. So hang on to your seats and let's get in terms of the global view. So the top line findings were addressing the three key questions. Was what has been the impact of COVID-19 on South African businesses? And then the second thing is, how are they responding to it? And then lastly, more importantly, is how should South African business do next in terms of their recovery and growth? So looking at the first question, I don't think, I mean, everybody on this call, you know the scenario that we've been in as a country. And right up to the onslaught of COVID-19, it did not require an economist or a scenario planner to give you an idea of how South Africans would respond to that questions, because all that it did is, like, as a country, from a social perspective, and I'll talk about the economic perspective as well. From a social perspective, it was quite clear that things could not be worse. And I think what COVID-19 did in terms of the context is that except on the right to say it's just 10 things from bad to worse and to downright ugly. And I like that quote because it captured that essence to say the pandemic has unearthed South Africa's stark social and economic differences between rich and poor. And experts say the crisis has worsened the country's ailing economy as the government flounders to find a solution. Looking at the economic side as well, it's even more dire. I mean, if you look at all these economic factors from 2018 to 2020, I mean, you can see that these are the kind of things that will keep any business person in South Africa and giving them a sleepless nights. It is really being a perfect storm in terms of moving from how bad things were and just COVID-19 making it even a bit worse. So how did they respond to that question on that impact? I think the headline there in terms of business in South Africa over-index globally on being kept awake at night is true, because as I said, some of these things will not be surprising to you because you are in the market, but it's always good to see how, when it's quantified, and also importantly, how we compare with our global counterparts as well. And as you can see on the left of your screen, the concerns about the economic impact on the country is quite clear, about like more concerned, more than half of South African businesses more concerned about the impact on the country, and even over-indexing on global. And that translates, obviously, to concerns about the overall business performance. Again, over half of the business been worried and having extreme concerns and very concerns regarding the impact on their businesses. And the main concerns, if you look at the right of the screen, has been issues like recession, financial issues, regulation, talent, and capabilities. Let's delve a bit into each of those. Now, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, the key ones in proportion, in terms of the proportion to global, that is really of a big concern, but also within the big five in South Africa as well, is about financial hardships amongst the customers. That's quite interesting because the response was not just about financial hardship, was not just about the issue regarding where the economy and their business will be impacted, but at the core of it is as a result of customers going through a rough time. Now, that's important for us in marketing community, right? Because we are always trying to strive to put consumers and customers at the center of any business strategy. So it was good to be hearing people from the C-suite thinking about the experience of customers and the lack of spending. And as you know, that, this is growth. Growth is the most sustainable growth is demand-led growth, which is about consumer spending. So quite clearly, so a big concern around that. The recession as well, as we've mentioned, and it's interesting if you look at that we were a bit lower than the global benchmark, but it's not surprising, I suppose, because we have been in a recession, as I've mentioned before. And then the next was regulation. The proverbial thing that you hear about business is, if there's one thing that business wants, is certainty. And if you think about the political, legal, or regulatory changes, it is in this country, it is anything but stable. So a big concern as well. And then the capability one was mostly through the lockdown in relation to distribution capability, supply chain capability. Because of the lockdown, there was limitations around that. And definitely last but not least, it will be the hardships that the employees had to go through. And also remember, a company's employees are somebody's customer on client. So the two are interrelated. And sometimes zooming out a bit from SA, you realize that, we share the same concern that has been expressed in terms of consumer spending, both from a continental perspective and also from a global perspective. And a large portion of consumers also echo those sentiments. And Natalie will touch on that in terms of that impact. Perhaps we must the key takeout of this is we must accept as a society that the situation we face right now is, and I said I was not going to use this word, the new normal. Well, it is the new normal. And instead of waiting for things to change, I think we'll be in this state of flux for a while, and we must just adapt to it. And it goes back to the cause that we said before. There will be resurgence. That's definitely. And if you think about this country with winter coming through, there will be further lockdowns. And though the vaccine is being rolled out across the world, but we know in this country, it will take time for it to be for most people to be immunized. So what it says is this is the reality we are going to be living with, and we have adapted to it. The second question is, okay, now you know about the dual drums, and I didn't want to depress you about our recession and about where we are as a country, but we are a resilient nation, yeah? More resilient than any other country, I guess. And I think the next question was, how are South Africans' business responding? The truth of the matter is, it depends on the sector, the category, and the brand. Because if you think about it, I think different sectors and categories will be impacted differently by COVID. Think about it, for example, there will be some sectors who had, because of COVID, in a twisted way, there were a bit of some clear-cut opportunities that COVID presented that need to be exploited. And on this, it will be quite interesting to hear later on, because I'm thinking about telcos, for example, how AB, his views in terms of how they responded to this. Others were presented with opportunities that were not so clear-cut and easy to do, but to mine further and to think how they can change in terms of making the most of it. In this way, think about retail and the adoption of online. And of course, there are others who have to completely adapt their sector and their business to a new realities because COVID completely messed up their sectors and category. In this way, think about travel and think about hospitality. However, the key thing to take out of this is no action is no option. Regardless of how bad or how light this impact on you, there had to be some responses. But let's look at how then it was, how the business in SA responds. responded. It's not surprising if you look about e-commerce, right? I mean, now it's like a cliche. Everybody's talking about how it's great COVID-19 have really moved adoption of e-commerce. As much as it's a cliche, but for me, I still find it incredible in terms of the adoption of e-commerce at mass. Because in the past, in this country, unlike on the continent, e-commerce has always been something like is the higher end of the market. It is encouraging to see that it's now being adopted at mass, and we might finally be able to be catching up with what is happening across the continent. And the 67% was in terms of business changes. There's that word again, another one that I thought I was not going to mention, pivot business to adapt to new conditions. But it is, I think everybody understands, and 67% of the respondents in SA knew that you can not just act, you had to change to that. And of course, there was 75% investment increase in it. Remember, these are the positive actions that has been taken. We will talk about the negative ones. So when we talk about 75% increase in marketing and innovation, this is within the positive ones, and maybe far much more on those businesses that COVID actually was more of a positive. However, when you look at the bulk of it, that the actions that have been taken, which are negative, the key and the most horrific part of this is 74% in some shape or form having to deal with reduction of staff costs. And this included things like hiring freeze, cancel salary increases, temporary decrease of number of hours of staff, and suspension of contracts. And I think besides the economic impact, you can just even imagine the social and moral impact that this has had on the country. But that has been the key one that in terms of taking action, South African businesses have focused on. And of course, also marketing investment went down 37% norm in terms of 37% of them to saying they will be reducing their marketing activity, which is not surprising. And I think if you counteract that with what I said previously, that while others were increasing it, there were quite a lot who were also decreasing it. And of course, the overall investment decrease of over 40%, which is, again, not surprising, because in this instance, if you continue haphazardly investing while there's COVID-19, you'll have to be quite a brave person or a maverick or both. And just in closing, there were also some responding to things that are quite obvious, which are basics like hygiene factors. I think also the upsides of COVID-19, I think offices and places have never been cleaner in terms of hygiene being a focus, which is great. And then the next one is about the staff in terms of, and the key part of that is the actual debate that is happening, I know, across different companies, including us. Do we work from home or do we work in the office? But in terms of making change to try to find solutions to that. And the third part of it, as I was mentioning, in terms of the human impact of it, has been in terms of companies standing up to say internal support, especially in terms of mental health of companies. So the Ubuntu aspect coming into their understanding that this has had such a devastating impact, not only on employees, but also their families as well. And some business changes in terms of that has been alluded to before, reviewing and planning different business narrative, and of course, doing some external support as well, okay? So with regards to all of you who are here, what has been the response regarding marketing inside related industries? Regarding brand-related responses, the third thing, it has been cost-cutting plans are being executed as we speak. You are in those industries and you know the kind of conversations that you're having with your CEOs in terms of cutting those budgets. And if you look at it, those cost-cutting has happened. We've looked at it from marketing in general, trade marketing, communication and media, and marketing research. Interesting, as you can see, the deepest cuts has been in marketing itself. That has been where the biggest reduction has happened. And the least of them, which is not surprising because there were still still products being sold out there, and shopper was now becoming far much more important during this time, even a bit more than the consumer, was trade marketing suffering the least of the increase, and of course, market research and communications being somewhere in between. So more importantly is with regards to how they are responding, there were some key questions about how should you be responding going forward in terms of recovery and growth. And here is the response to what you should be doing to be addressing the issue of recovery. And they range from the tactical to the strategic. But as I mentioned before, it is actions that have been taken, because not acting is an action in itself, which will have consequences against the global benchmark. I think we were even a bit higher in terms of 87% versus the 64%. And if you look at the right-hand side, in terms of the key business action needed that they are considering, the C-suite people that you talked about, it was organization, again, strengthening e-commerce, which mentioned before. Strategy itself, relooking at how you do strategy. And of course, the reduction of costs and overheads long-term, business changes, and information. So we'll delve a bit deep in the ones that are highlighted, right? Because those are the ones that we need to think about, which will be different in terms of different industries. I mean, things like strengthening e-commerce, it goes without saying, and reduction costs. So talking about those four, if we start looking at what does it mean in terms of organizations, at the highest of that is what I've alluded to before, new ways of working for staff, being agile, being a bit more flexible. And on this point, I think if there's one thing that COVID has taught us, is sometimes not to have this either or approach to things, right? It's about sometimes COVID has taught us, like if you look at COVID, if you happen to be talking to people who are saying, close the country because of people's life, or people who are, you have to open it up because of people's livelihoods, the answer is in the middle. So it's not a zero-sum game that you have to choose one or the other. And in terms of what organizations should be doing in terms of how staff works and all that, is trying to get the advantages of each of the two sides of working from home, maybe, or working in the office. And the strategy is quite a key one, and that is particularly important to everybody on this call who is in insights and marketing field, right? It's in looking at it to say, what are the new segmentations that we should be looking at? Has, for example, COVID come up with some segmentations that were not there before in terms of how we take our products route to market? Are there some things that we thought about before, but we used to think like e-commerce, for example, used to be just a nice to have, now it has to go mass. Are there some connections and partnerships which we might have to be doing? So there have to be a recalibration, re-looking, refocusing, repurposing of what we used to do. The strategy has to change. And then the business changes is new ways of working with customers. Is one of the most overused term in marketing. Is collaboration. Is something that is so important and that is so critical. But it has ended up just being just a throwaway comment. But now what it means is really tangibly looking how you collaborate with your customers and your consumers. The last thing is, of course, is information, better access to data. You see, that is quite key because I think everybody talks about data. And everybody has said that the problem is not data, is being data rich but inside poor. But making decisions based on gut feel and not on data is simply suicidal. Why, if you have all the data available, especially about consumer, wouldn't you consider it to inform the plans that you'll be doing? Now, and as I said, Ness will be talking far much more about from the consumer lens, And I mentioned this before to say, it's been quite interesting in terms of even before COVID-19 about how consumers being put at the center of organizations has been growing. I mean, if you think about it, there's even been, if you think about concepts like consumer centricity, purpose, shared value, and emergence of titles like now you have chief commerce officer, chief consumer officers, chief customer experience. Even before COVID, I think finally, and which is great for all of us on this call, finally, the thing of putting consumer at the center is quite critical and it's been embraced. And COVID have just facilitated it. And I think when this question was asked to them to say, do you think consumer habits and behaviors will change after the crisis? And when 93% globally, that's not even in South Africa, globally says of C-suite expect consumer behavior to change, that's good. That's good for us in the marketing and insight industry and brand because, again, as I said, it puts consumer at the center. And the title was saying, in the previous slide was saying, of course, it has to be about consumers, and consumer might not be always right, but they are the queen, right? And that's the difference. It's a bit ridiculous to say consumer is always right. It's not true, but they're the queen, and the queen rules. So it doesn't matter whether they are right or wrong, you've got to comply. Now, if you look at the kind of consumer behaviors, you can see on the left-hand side in gray, you can see things that they say they will decrease a little. And on one side, you can see the ones in purple are the things that they say from a consumer perspective, there's going to be an increase, like the obvious ones, like online purchases and online education and virtual socializing and the likes. The key is not what will go up and what will go down. More importantly is what is the implication in terms of that? Because there might be some needs and some spaces that we've never looked at before. There will be some industries with these rises and increase, they'll have a direct impact. But I think the magic and the growth is going to come in seeing spaces and needs and making dots and connections that at a face value, you might not be seeing it. Remember, though the consumer might be the queen and it's rightfully that they are taking the rightful throne, remember, sometimes they do not even know the kind of needs they have. And that's where innovation and creativity and insights becomes extremely important. Moving on, because I think this train might be going a bit slow, but I think we are a bit, and now my screen is frozen. And then we move. To cut the long story short, because of time, that's where insight becomes important. I kept on being on the drum about why it always have got to start with insight, whether it's about innovation, whether it's about creativity, whether it's about trying to understand what your brand now means and or the media to get better return on investment, it always starts with insight. So in summary, one, COVID demands a response from business regardless of the sector or category. No action is not an option. South African, as only us can do, needs to be even more resilient than they have been to weather the storm that is self-created really over and above what coronavirus has done. Three, consumer-led growth is the only sustainable business growth that requires insight, innovation, and creativity to respond to the key theme that was coming out about the pressure that the consumer is feeling. Number four is short-term tactics at the expense of sustainable brand and business growth is just simply a bad investment. So it should be less of either or and more of and, short-term and strategic. Number five, digital transformation, while in the past used to be a nice to have, now it's critical business basic. And lastly, it is less about cutting budget. Of course, you have to cut the budget, but it is far much more about making sure that you take the budget and applying based on data in understanding of consumer and responding to it. I'm going to hand over to Arye, and I hope I didn't go over the time.
No, that's all incredibly valuable there. No action is no option. There's no either or. And indeed, this is not a zero-sum game. Thank you, Chief Executive Officer of Kantar SA, Ivan Moroke, for those insights from the Kantar Global Business Compass Survey. And don't forget, still to come, we'll touch base with Marketing Director at RB Health Africa, Kunal Segal. But if you've just joined us, welcome to this special Red Zone Financial Mail and Kantar South Africa discussion. We're probing the question, COVID-19 has changed everything. Has your marketing plan kept up? Right now, let's bring Managing Executive of Brand Communication and Sponsorship at Vodacom, AB Mokgwatsane, into the conversation to get a little bit sector specific. AB, we chatted right at the beginning of lockdown in a special Red Zone broadcast, and I was incredibly impressed by the strength of leadership that you were showing in the marketing sort of division of Vodacom in a very uncertain sort of time. And Ivan alluded to it, that at face values, it would appear that sectors such as Telco have benefited from COVID-19. We now have the opportunity of hindsight several months after that chat. So tell me, what have been some of the not so obvious challenges that you've been confronted with? We know there's been a lot of growth, but what are some of the challenges that you've been confronted with as a telco from a business and consumer perspective?
Thanks, Arye. First of all, I just want to say happy International Women's Day to all the women yesterday. I mean, I certainly feel we should be celebrating women on a daily basis, but yesterday was a special day. So happy Women's Day. In our business, I think what's happened, and it's probably the same across the entire business landscape, is that customers have really put us under pressure to live up to being an essential service. And that's really mean that we've had to step up on a number of fronts. We've had to step up in terms of our network investment. We've spent, over 750 million over and above our budget this year in network capacity. We've had to step up in terms of the value that we provide our customers. 2.7 billion rand investment in price cuts in the year that the financial year that we're in at the moment. We've had to step up in terms of service. Just by indication, the volume of customers that are now engaging with us through our social channels, looking for help and advice in terms of how they use our service, has increased by over 400%. So we've had to capacitate our ability to be able to engage with customers. We've got a 90% turnaround time within an hour of resolutions that can be resolved by anyone that reaches us through any of our social channels. And then finally, that I'm a major advocate for purpose-led organizations. They've really required us to step up as a purpose-led organization. Ivan was talking a little bit earlier about collaborations. We've had a partnership with Discovery where we've provided free medical assessments for anyone for free with a qualified doctor. And that service can be provided to you from the safety of your own home. And then, from an education perspective, we've got a service called eSchool that has the entire public school library available for learners. There's about 1.2 million learners who are using the service because sometimes learners couldn't get to school or they don't have books. So we've really had to step up on a number of different fronts. And I think while these are almost unintended consequences, they've helped us become a better business in that regard.
That's a massive shift to go from sort of being a telco to an essential services provider. When you say essential services, I think of ambulances flying through the streets, but when you contextualize it, communication, it really actually has become that. And that's a major shift and very much must speak to sort of being a purpose-led brand, because suddenly your reason for being changes quite a bit. Talk to me for a second about some of the changes that you're observing in your consumer and business customers, and what that means to you as this essential service.
So the changes are really, the kind of four aspects that I've spoken about. The challenge for us and the opportunity, I guess, is as people are working, studying, and socializing from home, our ability to be able to connect society is that much more important. So people are much less patient now about those basic service delivery requirements that they have of the network. What we are seeing is certainly that there's an expectation for us to deliver to that. And also what we're seeing is that people are anticipating that as they're going into this new digital world, they're going to need companies that will help them with that transition. I mean, we're moving from just being a telco into being a digital business. And what we're doing is we're providing the tools and the services that will enable that. So we've seen, for example, that we now have an increase of over 1 million subscribers that are now using our app as a way of engaging and getting a service from our business, which is just, people are moving into a much more digital economy, and they are looking for partners that are able to facilitate that. So certainly, while we've had as an ambition as a business to move and transition into being a technology company, the pressure is coming from our customers, both in our enterprise as well as in our customer business, to make sure that we can live up to that.
Certainly an extended sort of range of services. I never thought that I would have to bank my bucks every Friday in order to ensure that I was getting the most out of my relationship with my service provider. I mean, everyone speaks. Everyone speaks to, this magical moment that comes when you take your right or your left arm, you get your vaccine, and we return back to normal. But I think that we're far enough into this now to know that there is no return to what it was before. What do you think from a Vodacom perspective you're going to take and you're going to leave when the entire country, the entire world, in however many months or years from now is vaccinated, and we do start returning to some sense of what things were like before, but in a brand new context?
One of our ambitions is to create a digital society where nobody's left behind. And I think we've got a real opportunity to do that now. People are using digital platforms, they're using digital tools to do all the things that really matter to them, to run their businesses, to connect with communities, to connect with families. And we think that trend is going to continue. And we're certainly facilitating and innovating around that. I think one of the interesting aspects, I've got a team of about 70 people that I've looked at, is how we are managing our own our own staff members and our own team members in this new world. I don't think we're ever going to get a situation where people are back in the office like they used to. I've already got about 7 of my team members that are living outside of Johannesburg, running massive campaigns, but people are not even in Johannesburg. And why do you need to be? Why do you need to be physically in a place when you can communicate and engage and be productive? But we've just finished our talent review. And one of the interesting things is we haven't done a talent review since before COVID. And all of a sudden we were doing our talent review and we realized that there are some of my leadership team who have never seen some of the people that we were talking about. Because these people are coming into a digital world. They're at home, they're logging on. You never necessarily see them on video. You just have no context of who those people are. So how do you actually do an effective talent review? And I think one of the things we're going to have to think about as a commercial fraternity is, how do we adapt the way that we manage our talent in a virtual world? How do you get people, for example, to almost be rated on a daily basis in terms of their performance and their delivery, so that by the time the talent review comes, you're able to look at some work and make that a credible review? So we certainly have that to adapt to. But one of the interesting things for me, I've always spoken about purpose-led organizations. That is an epiphany to me, is that you cannot be a purpose-led organization if you haven't done the basics. Being a purpose-led organization is almost at the top of the Maslow hierarchy of organizations. You need to get the basics right. No one cares if you are making the world a better place if your product is not at the right price, is not available, and your service isn't right. So we're certainly coming to that realization. So in order for us to be and maintain our position as a purpose-led organization, we're going to need to continue to make sure that the basics are working for our brand and our organization. And we certainly need to innovate in the way that we manage the talents that we've got in the business.
Thanks so much, Abby. Let's look at some of the basics that will inform that barometer. And we cross now to Kantar's 8-wave global COVID-19 barometer study. We're going to be taken through that by Chief Client Officer at Kantar, Natalie Otte. Abby's told us we need a digital society. Natalie, please help us make this happen.
Thank you so much, Arye. So hi, I'm the Nats piece of the Ivan and Nats show. And because Ivan likes to talk so much, I'm going to be speeding even more than he said he would be speeding, although I don't think that was speeding. But as Ivan said, while I just share back again, if any of you need us to come around and chat to you or your teams and give you a bit more detail, we're happy to do that. Okay, so my screen, should be able to see my screen, hopefully.
Perfect. We can hit play.
Okay. So I'm obviously going to focus on the consumer lens. The first thing we asked people was how concerned they were back in March. As you can see at the bottom there, we tracked this from March last year all the way until end of August. And really, we wanted to know how people were feeling. And you'll see right at the top there in the turquoise dashed line is South Africa. And actually, South Africa has emerged as one of the most concerned nations in the world, closely followed by Kenya, but very much more concerned than Italy, than Spain, the UK. So we really are quite concerned. But the interesting thing is what's driving that concern for South Africans, it is not necessarily health as much as it is financial concern, economic concern, recession concern. And I think we saw that in the business piece with Ivan as well. Whereas in a lot of the other countries, we do see health coming through a lot stronger. So what does this mean? Well, it means for South Africans, we really are feeling the pinch. And over half of South Africans have already felt the impact on either their employment, the hours they are working, their salaries, and an extra 20% of South Africans are actually saying they're expecting a huge impact on their financials in the very near future. And so really there's a feeling among South Africans that we need financial planning. And if you look at the right-hand side of that screen, some of the things that they are doing is paying a lot more attention to prices, paying a lot more attention to products on sale. And even with the concern around moving around with the pandemic, they will actually switch stores to find better prices and better deals. So with all this going on in people's minds and they're feeling really concerned, what is the impact on how they're making decisions? So although we can see a huge increase, as I said, in people searching prices and deals, we also see, if you look at the yellow line, people wanting to keep purchasing the same brands they've always purchased, which means people are still very much keen to stick with their tried, tested, and trusted brands. And that is a great, I guess, example of the power of strong brands and of brand building, right? Because people want the familiarity of those trusted brands. And we actually see, even in the lower income segments, which is a segment we call the Nelenes, who earn 5,000 Rand household income or less, they are concerned about not finding their favorite brands on shelves or not finding their favorite brands in the right pack size. So as I said, although this points to strong brands, there's also a huge risk that if people cannot find the brands that they're looking for and their favorite brands are not available, that they will be willing to swap that out or try something new. And if that brand delivers, if that new brand they try actually delivers and works for them, it will most likely form a part of their repertoire. On the flip side of that, though, if they try that brand and it doesn't really deliver, they will actually probably go back to their favorite brand with stronger loyalty because they just cannot afford to make mistakes with their money. And I just wanted to make a point. We saw a lot of this going on in the alcohol industry with many out of stock and distribution issues, especially with the opening up and the closing of the trade so many times. And therefore, we've actually seen a general increase in people's repertoire in the alcohol category because of that, because of trying so many brands and actually some of them sticking to it as well. So how do we avoid people switching, swapping, and squeezing in this time? Well, the first thing is availability. Obviously, you have to be available at the right time and at the point of where your consumers want to purchase you or make decisions. But the other thing is the value equation. You have to get the value equation right, because although they are shopping for prices, they are also looking for value. So what are the benefits that you are going to deliver above your competitors that will justify your price? And we see things like trust, safety, quality, and convenience becoming more important in the value equation. But it's not just about the functional benefits. It is also about, it's also about the emotional side of it. So what we know is that brands that are seen to be different to others but that difference has to be meaningful to them. So not just meeting their rational and functional needs, but also their emotional needs. People are likely more open to paying more for those type of brands. So price alone, we need to be careful of using price alone as a strategy. People easily become addicted to discounts, which means we teach them to pay on price or shop on discounts. And if you discount too much, it could also affect your brand's perception around quality. So really, we need to give people a reason to believe, and we need to give them those benefits so that we can justify our pricing in a very economically pressured market at the moment. So what's the impact on the shopping environment? So most South Africans still prefer to shop close to home. However, we've seen this drop back towards the end of last year, coinciding with level 3 and the opportunity for people to shop more freely. But chances are that behavior will come back in line, but we still see a lot of people wanting to avoid superstores and big malls, and also people making more lists before they go into store so that they don't have to spend so much time in store. And this means things like browsing, impulse purchasing, and like brand conversions or diversions at shelf become very challenging. There's also increased preference for cashless payment options. And because some of these behaviors, as I'll point out as we go through, relate to ease and convenience, we do say that if it makes people's lives easier and more convenient, these behaviors are likely to stick. What we've seen is the growth of e-commerce during lockdown, and AB spoke about it, and Ivan as well. And it looks like it's set to continue, but you'll see there that the use of physical stores have actually come back in line, and we haven't seen in proportion the e-commerce or the direct delivery decline. And so what this is telling us is that these channels are going to have to coexist, and it's going to be an omni-channel world for our products and our brands out there. And although e-commerce and online shopping is still very small in South Africa, the appetite is definitely there. And we still have 50% of people saying towards the end of last year that actually they want to do more purchases online. Although COVID has been a catalyst to this, and you'll see on the right-hand side, that was the main reason people started using online and direct delivery in WhatsApp and Facebook. We do see reasons coming through around convenience and saving time. And this means that people are likely to stick to that because it's making their lives easier. But we still see more than 20% of people saying that it's still quite difficult and challenging to actually shop online. And I think the brands and the companies that are able to innovate around that and make it easier for people and fit into our infrastructure in South Africa will probably be the ones that are more poised for growth and to win in the e-commerce space. So what is the impact on the choices they're making? What we are seeing is, not surprisingly, that categories that are viewed as essentials, and we've already spoken about telecoms, are the ones that have increased. We see mobile data, household cleaning products increase, while we've seen declines in cosmetics and personal care, fast food, home and garden. Interestingly enough, with the cosmetics, during the Great Recession, we saw actually that lipstick sales didn't decline as much because it was a little pick-me-up for women during that time. And now we are seeing lipstick sales decline, but we're seeing actually eye makeup increase because we're wearing masks at the moment. So goodbye lipstick effect, hello mascara index. But according to the World Panel data, if you look at the pictures in the middle there, we've seen that the brand that has seen the biggest increase across our households that we've tracked in terms of purchases across more than 24 countries has been Dettol, and following Dettol is Harpic. Both brands obviously well known for being able to kill the coronavirus, and both brands from Rick and Binkies actually. And then interestingly enough, third on that list was Royal Baking Powder, followed by Hellmann's Mayonnaise and actually Nutella chocolate spread. So some of these category choices will come back in line as normality returns. And therefore the challenge will be, I guess, how to maintain that category and brand interest without the pandemic as a catalyst, or how to renew that category interest through being relevant in the current times. One of the other trends we're seeing come through is this rise in people want to buy in local. We've seen this trend over time, but again, it has accelerated with the pandemic. People wanting to support local shops, support the local community. And we've really seen some nice campaigns like the VW example there that have really leveraged and capitalized on this trend. And so I think it's important to say that despite all these behaviors and these trends, at the end of the day, it is still the same brand. It's still the same humans. It's just a different context. And therefore, brands need to remember why people love them in the first place, and really stay true to who they are. I have many conversations with clients where they are questioning their comms and their messaging for their brand and whether they should pivot. And really, it is not about changing your brand positioning. It's about making that brand positioning more relevant in the current times. And one of the ways to do that is to not stop communicating with your competitors. We saw a lot of brands pull out and go dark during the course of last year. I know in many cases budgets are tight and sometimes it's not a choice, but people still wanted to hear from their brands. It was really important. And back in March last year, people wanted brands to tell them what to do and help them be practical and realistic. Whereas more towards the end of last year, people just wanted brands to take leadership and to be an example and guide the change, which is where purpose comes in. And one of the things we've seen that strongly correlates with purpose is this idea of responsibility. And actually over time, and it's not surprisingly, especially last year, responsibility has become very important for corporate reputation. And actually it's 3 times more important than it used to be. And driving that responsibility, the key thing coming through is environment, but closely followed by responsibility around society and responsibility around how they treat employees. So I think it's important that we continue to communicate to our consumers, as I said, but it's not always what we say, but also how we say it. And the point here is just that the impact you make as a brand with your comms out there, half of that is driven by your creative quality. And so really it is very important to focus on that creative quality and make sure that whatever you're putting out there and whatever you're talking about in terms of your brand is actually engaging and is going to cut through the clutter. And then obviously it's what you say, how you say it, but where you say it. And one of the trends we saw in the media space is just generally people spending more time engaging with media. And you'll see there that back at the end of August, that was up 43% in terms of people just engaging with various media channels. And actually that was across a multitude of channels, from internet surfing to online TV to TV on demand. And you'll see the two channels there that did suffer a bit was our traditional print, our newspapers and magazines. But the big thing here is that, and this was back in May, that when we looked at this again towards the end of August, we actually see that a lot of those channels did come back in line. So old habits die hard. We saw newspapers and magazines coming back in line. Radio, online radio and streaming actually continued to grow. Podcasts, TV on demand remained high. But I guess the big point here, and I was having a conversation with our head of media at Kantar, was not about pivoting marketing plans and changing channels and keeping up with the times, but it was more around thinking about the convergence of all these media channels and how to plan around that and not to plan these channels in silos. And also, I guess, to be ready when more of those traditional channels like cinema and out of home do come back in line. And so just lastly, I have 8 key points there just to leave you with, but I think the one central point is around understanding your consumers and understanding the humans, and even more so because things are changing so often and so quickly. And it is about being, customer centric at all times, both with your employees and your people, your consumers out there. So people are willing to pay more if you are going to give them a benefit and a great value equation. Brands that offer unique and creative solutions in that omni-channel environments will win, and also making sure that you are available where your consumers want you. Overcoming the data access, the infrastructure for e-commerce will really work for you. Continue to meet consumer needs, make a difference in lives, be authentic about your purpose and your responsibility. Local is even luckier than before if you can capitalize on that and if it fits with the authenticity of your brand. Any behaviors that we've seen, the ones that actually were no longer forced, but were about convenience and saving time, were the ones that we saw stick for a lot longer. So bear that in mind if you want some of these behaviors to stick with your consumers. Mental availability key, still continue to talk to your consumers if you can, and prepare for the resurgence of out-of-home cinema, all the traditional media channels once we get out of lockdown. Thank you. That is me.
I liked all of it, Natalie. I liked all of it except for the discount bit. We need more discounts. Don't tell people we don't need more discounts, Natalie. We need more discounts. And I could totally see AB smiling there when you spoke about purpose. So thank you so much for that powerful presentation. That's Natalie Otte, Chief Client Officer at Kantar, who shared with us Kantar's 8-web global COVID-19 Barometer study. Right then, let's cross to Marketing Director at RB Health Africa, Kunal Segal. We already know that some of your brands have done really, really well. Natalie told us all about the success of Dettol and Harpic there. But Kunal, I want to find out from you sort of with a broader lens, how is COVID-19 impacting the way that you build your brands and the way that you sell to consumers? And how do you think it's going to impact it in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? What is the thinking over at RB Health Africa?
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Firstly, thanks, Arye, for the question. So I think the biggest thing, and I think AB already touched upon this, and it's been a thread throughout the conversation today, but I think the one thing that will and does set brands apart from each other is purpose, and purpose that consumers buy into. It's not driven, during the pandemic or beyond the pandemic. It's for life. So I think that's one important factor. At Dettol, for example, we have a purpose where we want to educate 50 million children across Africa, change their hygiene habits, specifically focused on hand washing, because a simple act of hand washing can have a massive impact on people's future. So that's a sort of a fight, as we call it internally. So I would say, purpose sets you apart from other brands. Partnerships, I think, is very, very key. Here locally in South Africa, we've had a couple of partnerships. We had one with UNAIDS, where we provided Dettol products and JIC products across 22 nations, across the whole of Africa. And these essentially went to people living with HIV. So again, a vulnerable community at the time of COVID. We donated 2 million Dettol bar soaps, and we donated 600,000 bottles of JIC. Again, going to the people that are required. But we could not have done it ourselves. We have the expertise in making these products, in communicating these products, but we do not have the expertise in reaching, the people that require it the most. And here's where a partner like UNAIDS came along. We tied up with them, and we were able to reach more than 1 million people across the continent, which was just amazing and honestly very humbling. And then, we also tied up with the Department of Health here in South Africa. We donated 400 Dettol hand washing stations. Again, we can make the stations, we can get it, we can get them ready, but we need the Department of Health to help us sort of put them in the health clinics so consumers who walk into a clinic can stay hygienic. So I think partnerships is another one, which again will be for life. And a partnership is not a transaction. It's not a during COVID, post-COVID, it's for life. And we firmly believe that at RB. And this third thing, which I'll spend not even 5 seconds talking on, is e-commerce, right? So we grew exponentially, like I think a lot of the industry did. But what it did is it made us realize where we need to upskill from a people point of view, from a technology point of view. So I think those three factors have sort of changed, and really were critical in us winning in the market.
Kunal, what it seems like you've been successful at doing is during a pandemic, when everybody is just scrambling and trying to figure out what on earth is going on, and they're fearful, and they're not acting from a position of authority, they're acting from a position of fear. As you've been able to take really strategic thoughts and partner up on things that speak to purpose. What is your advice for brands that are almost conditioned, as many brands are, to think about the profit and loss statement for a specific financial year and look at a month's worth of revenue at a time, versus looking with glasses that see beyond 1 month or 12 months?
Sure. So, I don't know about advice, but I can share some tips from my point of view. I think priorities, it comes back to priorities. Right? It's a tough economy. We know, whether it's from a consumer point of view, whether it's from a corporation's point of view. You have to put your eggs in, I don't want to say one basket, but fewer baskets. So pick your priorities. Be clear what you want to go after. Be clear what the consumers are looking for. I think there was a conversation earlier. There were some insights earlier talking about value. Now you mentioned that yourself, Arye, in terms of you want more discounts. I don't think it's about discounts. I think it's about value. Right? It's about making the consumer feel that he or she and your brand is providing her value. Right? And value can come in different forms. It can come via discounts for sure, but it can also come via new ways of using a product. It can come via expanding the usage. It can come via comparing your product versus other products in terms of how long it lasts. So there are different ways of communicating value. And I think that's one thing that marketers or companies can do, because value is going to be critical and important. So focus, value, and then I would say, try. Crisis makes you try. Crisis makes you experiment. And if you don't experiment now, you're never going to experiment. And it's amazing. There are some things that we tried during the pandemic. An example that comes to mind is we tied up on Durex, which is one of the other brands we manage, with Waze during Valentine's Day. And, it had phenomenal pickup. Like the ROI was more than 2.5 times because, here's someone driving somewhere, and then, an ad pops up for the local garage to go and pick up a Durex. It's perfect, right? So I think experiment is another thing that, a crisis makes you do. And, there will be some things you lose on, but there will be some big winners coming out of it.
Well, we're excited to see, and I'm going to put them on the spot now, what Vodacom and RB Health do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months down the line. We've certainly established the connection this morning, some very strong shared thinking there. But thank you so much this morning to our esteemed panel, to Kantar. Thank you there to Kunal Sagal, Marketing Director of RB Health Africa. This has been a special Red Zone Financial Mail and Kantar South Africa discussion. We probed the question this morning: COVID-19 has changed everything. Has your marketing plan kept up? And running us through some insights and some thought leadership there was Ivan Moroke, CEO at Kantar South Africa, Abi Mokhwatsane, Managing Executive of Brand Communication and Sponsorship at Vodacom. He also runs really fast. Kunal Sagal, Marketing Director at RB Health Africa, and Natalie Otte, Chief Client Officer at Kantar. If you missed any of this, it's going to be available on demand on the Arena Events platforms. And don't forget to connect with the Kantar South Africa team if you'd like to chat further, and you absolutely do want to chat further around some of the information and studies and research presented this morning. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.